Hey y'all, it's your girl Toyia T, and of course I am on the road today, but I couldn't let it stop me from having our show. So I'm at the airport in my own private room, and I decided I need to talk to some people about there being a life after divorce. Because if you really know me, then I went through a divorce in 2019, and I've just been living my best life. So I just want to bring on some people that can tell you about how things have been after their divorce and how you can make the best of it if you go through something similar. So, with that, I'll go ahead and bring my guests on and talk to you about their experience. Hello, it's so good to have you guys. We have Brianne and Dr. Baker. I will let you guys do just a brief introduction, nothing crazy. Just a few minutes if you want to tell the guests who you are and just kind of a little overview of how you got here.
All right. My name is Brianne. I am a mom of three, and my daughter goes to school with Toya's daughter. So we've had a lot of time to connect and kind of, share our experiences in life. And some of those really parallel. So Toya invited me to be here today as a fellow divorcee.
Yes. Thank you for that, Brianne. Dr. Baker, do you want to do a quick intro as well?
Yep, absolutely. Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. J.C. Baker, originally from Detroit, Michigan, and relocated to Cincinnati and built a life here. And then that life turned. And so I've got two daughters. One is grown and one's a small child. So I'm nuts. And so I raised them and now trying to figure out what the next chapter looks like.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate you both being here, and we want to take this time to really dig in a little bit and find out how is their life after divorce. So I'll start with a couple of little questions. Feel free to share any stories that will help just bring light to the subject for our guests. The first question I have is, what was your biggest lesson learned as a result of your divorce? If you have a lesson learned that you could share with the viewers.
For me, it was really in life, you really just have to expect the unexpected. So I don't think any of us choose to get married with, divorce looming over you or thinking that that's going to be a part of your future. And I think I also learned that sometimes, things don't always just proceed as you thought. So, it's like you date, you fall in love, you assume the next thing you need to do is get married. And then you assume if you want it to work, it'll work. And, for me, it was just learning that things change, plans change, and that's okay,
I think for me, it's been more about, we use the term understanding all the time. Do you understand the other person? Do they understand you? Are you walking together in some level of unity? But I think that even words play a trick on us, where someone might say something as, well, I love you. Okay, well, what's the definition of love? And then all of a sudden, someone has their own individualized definition of it. And you're walking in multiple directions, believing that you're walking in the same direction. And so even after divorce, as you go to attempt to date or make friends, you find out that these definitions vary so much that you're like, wait a minute, I got to find a way to create a universal baseline. So at least we're walking on the same road. And in some instances, you're not even walking in the same state, let alone on the same road. So for me, that's been the biggest challenge, if you will, but not only the biggest challenge, but the thing that I'm learning.
Absolutely. I think for me, a big lesson learned was really understanding your almost your true north from each person. Because just like you're saying, Dr. Baker, I think our own personal experiences are different, and you always anticipate that the person is at the same point that you're at when you're having the conversation. But if you really start to dig deep and ask questions, sometimes you find out they're like in Alaska and you're in DC. And you're like, we're, really far apart here. And the whole time we've been just talking surface and not really getting down to those detailed conversations that really allow for you to know where are we starting from, as opposed to just kind of making assumptions around that.
Well, I think on top of that is, which that's a good point, but it's always been about from my experience is where you've been as opposed to where you want to go together. It always seems as if it's, what were the things you liked? Well, what are the things are we going to like, or we're going to value, or we're going to participate in? Those things seem to come later at a time when you are so far apart that you couldn't even see where you're even trying to go. And then that becomes problematic. And then once again, if you don't have the reference or the baseline, you have nothing to stand on. Then it becomes quicksand.
Yep.
Right. That's a very good point.
You
I
have
think
to be
that
able.
baseline-
Oh, I'm so
Go ahead,
sorry.
Bianne.
I was just going to say, yes, you totally have to be able to evolve together. And if you don't have a strong foundation, you can't really build upon that. There's nowhere to build.
Right. Because your evolution will go to another place, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your evolution may be here and his evolution may be there. And you're like, well, I thought we were evolving together. What happened here?
Right.
But then before you know it, you've evolved to different places.
Right.
Well, I think that before you know it, it's kind of like weight gain. You don't know you're gaining weight till you gained all the weight. Then you
Right.
look up and say, where did I get all that weight from? Well, you were always gaining it. Well, the same thing happens in a relationship is, how did we get this far apart? Well, every day it wasn't miles, it was just inches. You find out that where am I now? And you don't even know, and you're trying to get back to a place that wasn't even on the destination or the map itself from the original onset.
Absolutely. And so that brings me to my second question of, what do you think you changed in the way that you operate in your second marriage when compared to your first marriage?
That's pretty tough. For me, what I think has been unique is that I've actually been married multiple times. So I've had multiple divorces. And each time I tried something that I thought was told and read about, researched, prayed over, and thought that, man, this is a better execution plan, if you will. I'm going to mention these things. I'm going to take these steps. So what are some of those things? Well, you try everything from counseling to intentional dates to, moments where you guys can say, all right, we're just going to share these things or do this workbook. I mean, I've seen it all and I have done it all. The part that I think that has been missing for me is that where's the choice in this whole thing? When I say the choice, I tend now to look at most things like I look at my children. There's almost nothing that my child could do that would have me separate myself from them or the love of them. But I know in our society and the culture, we don't really see spouses that way. Like, if it doesn't work, just discard them and go get another one is a very, very common reality. Hence the reason why divorce rates are so high, as opposed to saying, no, it's my job to protect and love for good. And it's your job to help me through whatever it is for good. And then you execute that. So when we talk about the lesson that you learn, for me, it's how do I get to that value proposition now? How do I really determine if that's what's the inside and a value that you're willing to die for, as opposed to something you like or just makes you happy?
Right.
And I think in going back to what Dr. Baker was talking about previously, in that, you inch away from your partner and before you know it, you don't know each other anymore. And I would say that's one thing that my spouse now and I do really well at, is we maintain that connection. So we do make sure to have those conversations every day and know what's going on, not just in each other's lives, because we do have, separate lives. We both have, different careers that we are passionate about. And, we have our own friends, and so I really think we've worked hard to maintain that connection and grow together, and make sure we're kind of on that same path. So communication is huge, and also communication when it's uncomfortable, because I feel in my first marriage, I did a lot of where you store everything up and then it boils over and you put a little Band-Aid on it, and then, things are good. And then the next time it, boils over and it's a little bit more messy. And, I think we do a really good job now of making sure that we're very honest about how we're feeling and what we're experiencing. And even if it has nothing to do with your partner, they need to know, where you're at, instead of storing it all inside.
Right. Right. And what about you, Bianne, specifically, when you came out of your last marriage and looked to marry your second husband, do you feel like there was anything that you just looked to do differently going into it? Or was it kind of like, well, I don't think anything really went wrong. I just want to
I
what
think
was the mindset?
um I think, my mindset was for a partner, it had to be someone where we were a team. I feel like that's somewhere my first spouse and I, we didn't do well together, like working together as a team or as a family unit. And so it was really important to me in, as I dated or as a relationship progressed, because I wouldn't say that I involved, people that I dated necessarily in my, with my son and myself. But, as like that relationship evolved, I had to make sure that this was a person that I could work together with. This was a person that my child could, see as a role model and could fall in love with as well. But it was mainly just making sure that it was somebody that I could communicate with and work as a partner with. And I've been so fortunate in that, I do know in my heart, like my second marriage is forever. And being married a second time has let me see my faults too, because there's a lot of things that, that I didn't accept in my first marriage as being a challenge that I was bringing to the table. And, and that's still a problem now. So it's, something that I'm constantly working on.
Absolutely. I think we sometimes, we have to take responsibility for our part in it, but then you also have to identify when there's really not a whole lot that could have changed certain circumstances. And so once you're in it, you're just trying to make the best of it. But at some point, you have to figure out, okay, well, is the best of it going to be good enough going forward, or was the best of it just good enough to get me through, to the end point?
Right.
It's funny, Toya, that you mentioned that when you talk about recognizing your part. I struggle with that sometimes, because sometimes I don't even believe that there is a part. And here's, let me qualify that. I've done a lot of, I guess you would say, whether it was from soul searching to having therapeutic meetings to men's ministries, you name it, I've sat in them, I've done them. And one thing that always pops up is the subjectivity of our own mind. Is that we could see somebody and think that what they're doing is a problem. Someone else can do it and it's not a problem now. Well, 100%. The action was identical, but because that person did it and another person didn't, I deemed it a problem. Well, that means that I was the person creating the issue, not the actual action itself. So when I think about, I know my spouse, and the way that, I viewed my spouse in the past was, I didn't always think that everything necessarily was an issue. That doesn't necessarily mean that I was viewed similarly. I'm not saying that as a blame game. I'm saying that just as a philosophical positioning, is that some things are just the difference in the makeup of humans, right? They just are. And then we get irritated by things that if you thought about it and said it out loud, you're like, why in the heck was I even irritated by that? But in the moment you might have been, there's realities where, I know that this has been said a million times, but women are more emotional than men, right? They say that. And I'm like, I'm not sure I agree with that. Men are very emotional. That's how they end up fighting, disappearing for days, being with another female, substance abuse, quitting jobs. Like, they do things out of emotions. Right. They just look the same. And so all of a sudden we're condemning each other for things that we do individually. And you're like, well, how does that even work?
Right.
And just looking at things that we think are problems, maybe a little bit differently.
Yeah. I think everything is objective, right? It all comes from where your center is. And I think sometimes we have to deal with our own personal issues that the things are stemming from. It may be something that happened to you when you were 10, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, I just never like for a guy to say this, that, or the next. And, the guy doesn't even know, but he walks into a landmine because of something that happened to you when you were 10. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden you have to unpack it. And I think sometimes people don't realize that you're unpacking a bigger issue than just your husband or your spouse. But now it's dealing with the start of whatever the situation might have been and what caused the original trauma in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Go ahead.
There's a lot of patience involved in on my partner's, a potential partner's part, like when you're dating someone who's, recently divorced or recently out of a very serious relationship, there's a lot of patience involved. And I guess that was also something that I really needed to see in a partner, was that patience. And, just to give you an example, my husband waited for 7 years for me to combine my bank account with him, because that was just one of my holdups. It's like I felt like I trusted him with my life, but evidently not my money. So it took me a long time to feel really comfortable with blending that. And so that was a big step for us. And we've been on the same bank account for 3 years now, and it's going well. It's still going well.
Well, you talk about those traumas, since I'm out here in the dating scene, which is extremely weird and scary for me. I'm very awkward at it. Don't really know what to do or how to do. But I was dating a young lady, and just to give a really quick story, is that she lived out of state. I went to see her on Valentine's Day weekend, and I took her some flowers, some candy, and a card. Got there on Friday and gave it to her. Brought my daughter with me. I had never really given gifts before, right? I don't give them. I'm just used to being told what you want. I go get it. You can say I want a house, I'll buy the house, but I won't just buy the small thing because I won't know to do it, right? It just doesn't pop up naturally. So I brought that, and I thought I did a wonderful job. Like, you could not have told me anything. I thought I won the prize. And I'm being told, like,
I'm curious, what was the gift?
I know, I'm like on pins and needles here.
No, it was flowers, candy, and some cards.
Okay.
To me, that was the gift. Like, I had never gone, and in 40 years of living, like, going to buy something just doesn't pop in my brain that way. I have to be told to do it, right? So I'm bad at that. So to do it on my own, I thought I did something well, right? So I did that, and it was told, well, why didn't you give this to me on Valentine's Day? Why'd you give it to me on Friday? Said, well, I'm here for the weekend. I didn't kind of want to just sit in the car. I'm giving it to you now. Well, then I took her to dinner the next day. I drove back to Cincinnati the day after, drove back up on Valentine's Day and took her back to dinner that day, and was told I didn't do anything for her at all for Valentine's Day. My mind could not understand that, right? So obviously there's a disagreement that takes place. Here's the point of me saying that, is that when she said I did nothing, what she was really saying is I didn't celebrate her. And I'm like, okay, but in my mind, I thought that I was. So once again, it wasn't if we was or was not. It was, how do you view a thing? And then what is the expectation to the thing that you view? And then how do you work through that to grow?
My question is, so on Valentine's Day itself, were you not there?
No, I drove back out of town to go see her, and I found a way to take her to dinner that day too.
Okay, so on Valentine's Day, you actually took her out.
Yes, the same thing I did the 42 hours before then, and I showed up with gifts 72 hours before that. So I thought I made a weekend of it. Like, man, I'm doing a wonderful job. Only for it not to be a wonderful job. It was a terrible job. But it's not if it was good or bad. It's just the fact that expectations are different, communications are different, understandings are different, and you're only a toddler when you first start. You're not a seasoned veteran. No matter how many relationships you've been in, you still have to grow. If you've been married a year, you're only 1 year old. You're going to be really crappy at some stuff.
Right.
Even though somebody else might think, well, it's been a year, you should know my thoughts. I mean, go talk to my child and figure if they know our thoughts. And we're with them, raising them every day. Same with family members. And so my point is that you need time to mature these things. And there has to be some grace offered and some opportunities to mess some things up, in if a mess up is a real thing, and to get better at some things. Mm-hmm. But that's assuming that everybody's heart and intent is in the right place.
Right. I think the one thing for Valentine's Day, and this is what I'll say about that, is that some people, if they're a receiving gifts type of person, then they want a little more thought and like attention spent to the choice of the gift. Like, you can give roses to anybody, right? But if you have a woman and her favorite color is purple and you give her purple roses, well, that says, well, I sought out purple roses for you because I know that you like purple.
No, academically, that makes all the sense in the world to the person that knows how to give gifts because they want to receive them. But on the flip side, it doesn't make all the sense to the world to the person that doesn't behave in that manner. So it's no different if you were a math person versus an alphanumeric person. Is that numbers might make sense to you where letters make sense to someone else.
Right.
Are you not thinking about the numbers? It's like, yeah, I am, but as far as I can go is arithmetic. Can't really go calculus. And you talking calculus to me right now. Right? So me giving you 1 + 1 is 2 was being thoughtful. Whereas you're like, well, anyone could have done that. You're like, yeah, but that's not my skill set. Even if it might be yours, what you desire to have. Is that
right?
Sense?
It makes sense.
I'm just saying that's where grace needs to come in. I didn't like not get the purple rose to destroy you, right? Or to end your life, right? It was only given because that was all you knew to do. And it's vice versa, right? So if she comes up short in some spots, where does the grace come from? So even after divorce, you're saying, well, what did you learn? It's learning how to make sure that the dialogue hits the points that typically caused your demise previously.
Right.
Honestly, I think it's pretty impressive that you guys felt comfortable enough to have that conversation with each other, rather than her just being disappointed. But I have to say, as a quality time person, I would have been thrilled with that. I think that what you did was fantastic, so it's about that communication, like you said.
Right. Which goes back to subjectivity, and so it's those types of things. And after, because you talked about trauma, right, Toya? Well, for me, her behavior was trauma to me. So I was like, I'm done with her. And the whole dating thing, like I'm out. I push the out button, right? But for someone else, they might say, okay, well, should you offer some more grace in that instance? Like, no, because I'm already scarred right now from what happened in my marriage. So how do I maneuver in the life after divorce? There are some good things, but there's also some tricky things too.
But how can you ask for grace, but you're not giving any grace?
No. I'm just giving you one example of a whole bunch of other things. That's all I have time to talk about was that one example.
I have a quick question though. Would you agree? For me, I decided in the beginning of dating, I'm like, if it's hard, like I'm not doing it right now. If I've only been with somebody for 3 months or 6 months and we're fighting and can't get along, I'm not going to go to counseling, that is an indication to me that it's not going to work with us. And that's exactly what dating is. Like, you're not committed to that person. So for me, I decided if it was hard, like, wasn't doing it.
Totally
until you get to a certain point, then you fight for it.
Well, what are some things that, and this is totally off, but what are some things that you evaluated when you were considering the second marriage? Because I think, like for me, I look at my first marriage and I go, well, that sets the bar for my second marriage. I was married for 14 years. Mm-hmm. So if you've been married for that long and you've been able to make something sustainable, to me, it's like, well, you need to look for the things that you can control and make sure that those aren't an issue, because there's going to be things that come out of left field that you won't be able to control. But at least you can go in with the mindset like, oh, I want him to be financially stable. And, oh, I want to make sure that I'm, getting with someone that wants to be a husband, not just to have a wife. There are I think a list of things that you can control and know what you're walking into as opposed to it being a surprise.
I fully agree with that. I was just having this conversation earlier this week regarding the list. My list is really small. I mean, it can't be shorter. However, even though there's only 2 things on that list, like the 2 things are pretty difficult. And so really one's pretty easy. The other one's kind of difficult. So in that case, what's that?
What are your 2 things?
Well, you got to be physically a pleasing one, but that's going to happen automatically. Either you are or you aren't when you see somebody. You already know that. So that part's pretty much taken care of, and that's easy. But then the next is you have to love the Lord more than anything else. Well, that gets pretty hard for me because there's a lot of people that say that they do and they don't. So then if they don't, then all of a sudden we have no baseline to live on. So everything that I believe in, whether it's from how to navigate to how to integrate or what do we stand on when things get difficult, our baseline is shattered and ruined. So therefore, that part becomes very difficult for me. So my list is really those 2. I can manage after that point. But finding someone that sees the similar value back to me, that's where it gets really unique to me, is who sees me and then says that person there is worth it. And this is my baseline. Right. That's the hardest part there. Not my ability to control me and to stand on my values.
Right. It's matching up the values of the other person with what you bring to the table and who you are as an individual.
Right. You know, because most people have a list, like if you're educated or not. I personally may not care. Whether you got money or not, don't care. I used to say I don't want kids because I don't want to be a granddad dad because I'm getting too old to have little tiny babies. But depending on who it is, I might overlook that. Right. And so, you know, most of those things are just preferences that come and go. I'm looking for like, no, what's the hardcore foundational part of those things? And that part gets a little tricky.
Yeah. So no two situations are the same. It can be problematic comparing the relationship you're in with the one that you came out of. One needs to be very careful about that.
I think
absolutely true.
That's so true, because that goes back to what Dr. Baker said. Like, one person can do something and it would drive you bananas, but another person could do the same thing and it's like, it doesn't bother you at all.
It's like, but I love him.
Yeah. So, I mean, but that is, so I think to some extent, like, you can't really compare. And for me, a lot of it came down to really like trusting how I felt. Because I feel like I was very logical the first time I got married. You know, it was like, well, you know, we've been together this long and we love each other this much, and we're going to do that. You know, we want to do this X, Y, and Z. And I just feel like I was very logical. And for me, the second time, it really was about feeling and just trusting that, you know, that this was the right person. And of course, there are key things, like he said, you know, physical attraction has to be there. And I think emotional attraction has to be there. You have to be able to talk to each other and have fun together and enjoy each other. And I was fortunate in that, having a son, I got to see how he would be in a father figure role. And that was something that I really, really admired about him, was the love he had for my son. And, you know, and I've been so lucky to have my girls with him. And he's, you know, and that's one of the things I love about him the most, is him as a dad. So, you know, I think I just trusted a lot more my heart at this time. And, you know, and I don't think I ever had to get married again if I didn't meet the right person, you know, so.
Well, see, I struggle with that because I don't want to be by myself, nor do I believe that being by yourself is the thing that we were meant to do. But that's just where I am in that instance. You know, there's a lot of things that I can do to supplement my time that I feel great about. Nobody has more recreation than me. Nobody has more company than me. I mean, my house is nonstop, but that doesn't change at 7:30 at night. It doesn't change when I have a real secret to tell or have a real fear. You know, it's only so much I'm going to tell my brother or my buddies. Mm-hmm. You know, so after that, you're like, man, what do you do? And then you can't invest in every person you meet. And you're trying to get return out of any investment that you ever give. That part gets really, really dicey.
Right. Well, we have 1 minute. Any parting words that you guys would give? Final suggestions or advice?
I think that you have to remember that, as challenging as divorce is and as heartbreaking as it can be, and the changes that it makes, it's also truly an opportunity to start fresh and, you know, and not only like really grow yourself, but, you know, just elevate your entire, you know, sense of well-being. Like he said, making those connections and having somebody to tell those secrets to. And, you know, you're getting another opportunity at life. That's what divorce is. And that's it's another opportunity.
Yeah, I would call it that: recreation and reinvention, you know, and how do you do that as you continue to evolve on this journey?
Yeah,
absolutely. Dream a new dream. Don't be afraid to. Mm-hmm. All right, we appreciate you guys taking the time. That concludes our show, and we will pay our sponsors at this time.
Today's episode of The Plug is sponsored by the following companies. Our Gold Level sponsor is Goldberg Evans Law Firm. Goldberg Evans cares about what matters most. If you find yourself needing an experienced legal team for a family law issue, call them at 513-655-3500 or visit www.goldbergevans.com to learn how they can help you. Our silver level sponsors are the Vibris Company. Their mission is to bring a deeper awareness of mind, body, and soul connection through a variety of aromas. You can check out their website at www.thevibrisco.com and follow them on Instagram at _VIBRISS_company. And last but certainly not least, Donnie Young, an ADT authorized provider, supplying you with all of your security needs for your home, business, and beyond. For more details, call Donnie at 513-623-0679. The Plug thanks all of our sponsors for helping us keep you connected.